Well, good evening, everybody. It is myself. I am Nick, Pennsylvania, and I am here as I always am with my good friend Brendan Bond. Brendan, how are you?
I'm doing good, Nick. How you, bud?
Real good. I am excited to talk, and you have something that was presented to you by a listener you were not very familiar with. Dare I say you weren't familiar with at all, and I had heard of, but I didn't really know much about. And then we find out that somebody we've talked to a few times has written about this, and so therefore we
Right.
definitely read about this at one point, but just did not retain it because
hmm
you were holding a book in your hand that we do believe is my copy
Yeah.
of a book
Yeah, this is probably yours.
by
Yeah.
our friend Thomas White, who's been on a couple times. But anyway, I've said too much. I'm gonna pass it over to you. What have you got tonight?
Yeah, so this was something that was submitted by one of our listeners. He's probably listening. And just out of the blue, he was just like, "Hey, have you ever heard of this place?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." And the reason that that struck me as odd is because it's relatively close to us. It's just kind of a county away. And we like to think of ourselves as connoisseurs of local lore, obviously. So anytime someone sends something our way, of course we look into it. But when it's something close, it's usually a little more surprising that it's not already something that's on our radar, you know? Um, so what we're going to be talking about tonight goes by a few names. It's either called Kelley Road or Mystery Mile, which is a pretty cool sounding name for a haunted road. So where this is at, this is like very much like public knowledge. This is just over in Beaver County. It's up north of Midland, which is like a big general area over there in Beaver. Um, and it butts up against Tees with a road called Wolf Road, which we'll get to a little bit later. Sometimes is confused for also being Mystery Mile. And as with we've talked about mystery, we've talked about haunted roads on here before, especially with Blue Mist Road down in North Park, Pennsylvania. Like with a lot of these kinds of roads, you guys are going to hear a lot of the things you expect. Like if you just think like, oh, there's a haunted road, you kind of have your bingo card ready for that. But I think it's fascinating because this is one that not only is close to us and everything, but because it ticks so many of those different boxes and has so many probably dubious origin stories, I think is a really good example of haunted roads in, especially here in Pennsylvania, but probably through most of the country and probably most of the world, I would bet. Like Nick mentioned, there is this book that I, once I found one article online that referenced Thomas White, I was like, oh, geez, I bet he's written about this. And I'm like, in the Haunted Roads of Western Pennsylvania book. And sure enough, he does have a write up in there about Kelley Road. And there's another road that is often lumped into it also. It's called Mudlick Hollow, which has a road going through it. But tonight we're going to be concentrating mainly on Kelley Road because that is the one that our listener and my friend was able to reach out to us about. So
Yeah, doesn't have nearly quite the name that Mudlick does, but
I
you
know
know, you
Mudlick
work with what
Hollow
you
is
got.
yeah, it's a great name. You can understand why someone would want to perpetuate stories about Mudlick Hollow. Kelley Road, a little more pedestrian, pun intended. But yeah, so what we're going to do is just kind of look at this road tonight and see what you guys think.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm going to tell you right out of the gate. I was looking at the maps. I'm like, I'm certain that I don't know if I've been on this exact road, but I know for a fact that I have been on roads that definitely drive right by it.
yeah.
And one of the things I'm going to say out of the gate is much like now, you know this cemetery very well, but the Night of the Living Dead cemetery, it's
hmm
not really very spooky. It's also
It's
not,
not.
frankly, that old. And
Right.
this road reminds me of that fact in the sense that it doesn't appear to be particularly remarkable,
hmm
and it's not even particularly long. It's less than 2 miles.
Yeah. Not a big road. Yeah.
No, and not a major thoroughfare either. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's just a wholly unremarkable thing from,
Mm-hmm.
everything going.
Right. And I think that's why this is such like an interesting case or story because it's very easy to put yourself in the this could be anywhere kind of camp while listening to these stories, you
The
know?
Elm Street fear.
Right. Yeah. Every town has
Yeah.
Elm Street. Yeah.
That's why
Um,
Nightmare on Elm Street was called such, because
yeah.
apparently that is one of the most common names for a
Mm-hmm.
street in a town.
Yep. Yep. And I can vouch for that. Yep. I was just looking at a house on an Elm Street recently, so that's still stands to be true. But yeah, so when it comes to Kelley Road, I'm going to run down the kind of different phenomena that are reported because it's a lot of the things that, like I said, we've heard before. The first one is a strange fog on the road. Not just regular fog, but strange fog is reported by lots of different drivers on the road. I don't think it's necessarily unusual. I think fog is one of those things where if you don't see it very often, when you do see it, you're like, oh, this is a little more dramatic than I remembered sometimes, you know?
Well, and also in this neck of the woods, we get some really dramatic fog
We
at
do.
times. I mean, you already mentioned Blue Mist Road, which of course
Hmm.
one of the legends around that is the fog. And
It being
just
different. Yeah.
right in some of the wetland areas of which we
Hmm.
have quite a few, there I've seen some really dramatic fogs that really do creep across the road,
Yeah,
like you
they look
see.
fake. Yeah, almost
Yes, that's
sometimes. Yeah, they
exactly.
almost
They're
look
very
fake.
cinematic.
Yeah, so like you can understand why maybe that would be called out though, because again, I didn't find any descriptions of strange fog that didn't sound like what we just said. But yeah, so strange fog is one of them, which doesn't really in any of the sources for possible sources for these things. Doesn't really get addressed in any of those sources, and I didn't really find any actual descriptions. It's just lots of places say strange fog. So now one of the ones that's a little different, you don't hear as much, is docile animals becoming inextricably aggressive. Um, so if you have like a dog in your car or something, you hit this portion of the road and they just kind of start freaking out. There were stories that came across of people being chased by animals that seemed unusually aggressive on the road. One of those stories had chickens chasing cars, which is certainly unusual. And it looks like throughout history there were some farms on the road. So having there be livestock around to experience this, maybe there is some truth to that. Who knows? But docile animals being aggressive and then once getting to the other side of the road them kind of being fine with those ones in actually I mean really with a lot of these it seems like it's the southern portion of the road where most of the activity is kind of centered around, and whenever you hear about these animal stories that's usually where they list like, oh, about halfway up the animals suddenly are just fine, you know. Along with that, people talk about dogs with red eyes, which we can, I'm not sure if you want to interpret that as hellhounds, as we've talked about before with, W.T. Watson, Travis,
Right.
um, and or if we want to look at those as also just hyper aggressive animals that are also supernaturally possessed or something. I don't
Or
know.
just again, the red eye thing is another pretty common thing because
Mm-hmm.
I believe we've covered a local cemetery between the two of us where common trait is, or a common story told is red eyes will chase you out, will follow
Mm-hmm.
you until you leave.
Right.
They don't seem to be attached to any.
But the red eyes,
Right,
yeah.
the red eyes, and I know you've talked a lot about, well, nighttime animals, and
Mm-hmm.
dogs will have that that
Capitum
gleam in their
lucidum.
eye.
Yep.
Yes, that very special word that you
Yeah.
possess that I do not.
Yeah. But so which, so that's at least not the craziest story, but that's something that people do talk about. One of the ones we're very used to with a lot of these locations is cars acting up. So people say, especially legend trippers say, if you stop your car on this road, turn it off, it has trouble starting again. And if your car if you slow down too much, it'll just like stall out, and other kind of general malfunctions with a vehicle, that once you are able to get it out of that bottom half, whether over onto Wolf Road or to the top of Kelley Road, things start to act normally again. It seems to be localized to an area, not so much to the vehicle. I know we've talked about specifically with looking at Hell's Hollow and McConnell's Mills, with the bridge up here in up in Butler County. So that's one you hear quite often, is the cars having issues. And we'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but also some of that might be due to the time period in which a lot of these stories come from. One of the ones that is a little kind of, I think, creepier is ghost children on the road. Specifically, there is a ghost boy with a dog who walks around in old-timey clothes, like the boy, not the dog. Um, but they seem unusually like sad and maybe aggressive. There are people who report just children, so like multiple kids. A lot of them cite this boy and a dog, which sounds like kind of specific. So that kind of caught my attention. A lot of the rest of it is variations on kind of those four or five phenomena, whether it's seeing shapes or people getting a really bad feeling, as we've talked about, things along those lines.
Yeah, and a lot of these seem to be kind of the hits. I
Hmm.
mean, we've
Like
already
I
made
said,
the
yeah,
connections with
yeah.
the fog. The boy with the dog is the unique one, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah.
But if I'm remembering correctly, I believe the Mudlick story also has the boy with the dog. So I don't
Yes, they
know.
they kind of it seems like, and I think even Thomas White alludes to this in his book. The stories for both kind of get conflated because they're relatively close.
Yeah,
And
I'm just looking. They're about 8 miles apart.
yeah, right, which in folklore distance is practically next door when it
Right.
comes to where stories come from. Now, along the same lines with that, one of the things that kind of goes with that, from the things being kind of maybe conflated a little bit, is the other name for this road is Mystery Mile. The reason that people think that it's called Mystery Mile is there was a portion of time where only a mile of Wolf Road was paved, and like inexplicably they just like stopped paving at one point, which happened back in the 40s and 50s, which is where a lot of these stories seem to initially come from, is from
Yeah,
that time period.
I had heard, well, I hadn't heard, I had read where some people postulate that there had been a murder along that area of the road, and that might be where some of these stories originate. But I did some digging and I just did not find anything historically to support that. So I don't know if that's a dead end or it's just because I have a pretty thorough access to county
Hmm.
newspapers from this is in
So
Beaver County, PA.
yeah. So, well, it's funny. Well, not with Kelley Road, but with Wolf Road, there actually is a cold case associated with Wolf Road,
Which butts
from
up right against it. They
which runs up
intersect.
against it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which again isn't supposed to necessarily be haunted, but that's where people think the Mystery Mile stuff comes from, and that's where they think this story comes from. So I'm actually going to read a section from Thomas White's book here, where he is quoting Joshua Maley, who is a researcher from the area.
Yeah, and just to
Um,
butt in real quick, Thomas, I mean, he does his digging. I mean, we've
right.
talked to him at length. If you haven't heard our discussions with him, highly recommend because he's just,
Hmm.
very thorough. And yeah,
Yeah,
sorry
very
to
thorough,
interrupt.
very thorough, very clear. And if he says, "Hey, this is where this comes from," or if he has a theory, I'm interested.
Right,
Um,
because he's got some reason to feel that
right,
way.
exactly. So yeah, so this is a quote I think from him interviewing this Josh Maley. So Josh says, "The creepiest and by far saddest thing about the road is the story of Patty Patton. Patty was a little girl who lived on Wolf Run Road in the 1950s and was murdered very close to her home. She was only 4 when she died. Unlike many of the urban legends surrounding this road, Patty's murder is a well-known and well-documented notorious cold case in Beaver County. According to reports, Patty went outside to play on March 1st, 1956. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, she had been found dead on a hillside about half a mile from her house. Because of the large search party that went out to find her, the surrounding forest was heavily trampled and evidence of what happened was largely erased. Markings on Patty's body suggested she was strangled, which is awful. Joshua goes on to say, I've never once heard of a legend surrounding Mystery Mile that directly relates to Patty Patton's unexpected murder, which strikes me as odd. The other alleged deaths on the road, for which there seemed to be no record, as you just mentioned, Nick, seem to have urban legends tied to them. So why not Patty's? So,
I have a very weird thing because as you were telling the story, I'm doing some digging and looking
mm-hmm,
up. So all I'm gonna say is that I came across something when we moved here. We were very close family friends with a family that had a very similar last name. It was only
mm-hmm,
3 letters different than
mm-hmm,
ours, and they lived in that immediate area.
mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And apparently, I just looking up the name of the case and
Mm-hmm.
everything, I saw their aunt, who I've met, got a
Yeah.
cat from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Bumbles.
Bubbles.
Yeah. That,
Oh my God. R.I.P.
yeah, yeah. Great
Jeez.
cat.
Great
Anyway,
cat. Yeah.
she's related
Really?
to this apparently.
Wow.
That's all I'm gonna. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
there's a Times, the county of the paper of
Mm-hmm.
record within the county.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say any names or anything
Mm-hmm.
other than, oh, okay. So that's interesting because, that it was a family we would say we weren't related. We would say we were
Mm-hmm.
when we were
Mm-hmm.
kids because it was
Right,
essentially
right, right.
so,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Oh, that's
that's
wild.
weird. I'm learning this in real time.
Jeez.
So their aunt through marriage,
Mm-hmm.
her last name is Patton.
Wow. Wow.
And it's this other name
Mm-hmm.
hyphen Patton, but
Right.
so, and it cites her as being relative.
Relative. Wow. Jeez.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
pretty
that's
small world moment.
right for sure. And like, yeah, so I mean, like obviously that is like a very, very real tragedy that still has effects to this day, and doesn't seem to be any stories related to that directly, which this Joshua was kind of saying is kind of interesting because you'd think that would be the crazy story. So that kind of gets into where some of the source of these hauntings. So two of the more popular sources come from car crashes, as they typically do on these kinds of roads. Well, one is a car crash, and the other is actually supposed to be a carriage crash. And if you can believe it, it was newlyweds that came around a corner too quickly. Now, there are no records that, at least I mean, I could find that actually seem to tie to a carriage crash or a car crash. Now, I mean, granted, car crashes worse. It's possible we don't have that record and it did happen. But those could be dubious. But people say that they hear screeching tires or people just kind of yelling, and so it's not really clear if both those crashes, the carriage and the car crash, were are the cause of the haunting or were caused by the haunting. you know?
Right.
Like if it was a carriage, then maybe the horses suddenly became inexplicably aggressive and that's why they crashed, or the
Well,
fog obscured the view for the vehicle, it's kind of hard to tell.
one thing I'm going to say to that is a lot of the supposedly haunted roads in our immediate area
Hmm.
have a carriage or a buggy because again, there are a lot of Amish, especially if you go
Hmm.
just a little north of where
Right.
I'm at. There are whole
Right.
Amish communities, and of course, there's a highway that you and I drive by on the regular where you can watch it.
Hmm.
There's an Amish school. So, I know of a fatal buggy incident that's happened within the last 15 years.
Right. Yeah. So not
You know the bend where we like to fish
which.
on the Nishannick.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
There
Yeah.
is a haunted road not far from there that is supposedly haunted by a buggy thing,
Really?
with involving the Amish in like the 1960s. So,
Really?
like, yeah, I say
Okay.
this place is kind of with the exception of maybe The Boy and the Dog, a
Hmm.
classic. All the hits are
Yeah.
being played. Yeah.
Yeah. A funny story. There was one time where I was up in that same area fishing, and I was up there early in the morning, pre-dawn. Well, it was just about dawn. It was just starting to kind of get light. I parked and got out of my vehicle, my truck and everything. I saw two young Amish kids. Like they were probably like 11, 12, just a boy and a girl walking down the road. But I didn't see them until they were like 10 feet from me. When you're not expecting to see anybody, this isn't just because they're Amish, but when you're not expecting to see anybody and then you see someone like out the middle of the woods like that, like I jumped 10 feet in the air. It was so embarrassing because you could tell they were just like, what is this dude's problem kind of thing. And I immediately started laughing. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, kind of thing. And they're just like, cool, man. Like they just kept going, just doing like they were like, you could tell they were more concerned. Like, is this guy okay? Yeah, he's okay. Okay, we're getting out of here. But yeah, so like I mean, a buggy crash isn't necessarily something that had to have happened 200 years ago,
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, so no records that we could find on fatal crashes though on the roads.
Yeah, and I
Um,
had tried to look up different records on the road itself, and I was
mhm.
coming up real short. The only thing I come up with is a bunch of stuff about it supposedly being haunted.
Right, yeah. Also in the probably dubious category that you see cited a lot is that the land is cursed. Now there are two popular culprits for the cursed land theory. The first one is Native American peoples back in the 1750s, because right near there was Logtown, which is down in Ambridge, which was a very important kind of like, I guess it would be trade kind of
Yeah,
location. I
there
don't
was
know.
a treaty sign
Yeah, there's a
there,
tree sign there. Yeah. Um,
with the Aliquippa
mhm.
herself,
Yep.
is my understanding. I might be wrong on some of the things, but
Yeah.
yeah, Logtown was an outpost. It is an actual town now. It's not
Hmm.
much of a town. It
Right.
seems to be like one long street. It's
Hmm.
essentially a district of Aliquippa,
Right.
is what I would call it.
Right. But so there are folks that say that, oh, whenever they were displaced in the 1750s, part of that land was cursed, which Thomas White actually talked about with us on, I think, our first
Yes.
conversation about how like complex and deep like the proclivity of Western American peoples to attribute hauntings to Native American practices, and just how kind of like again like just like complex and nuanced that kind of can be. That being said, doesn't seem to be any actual evidence for that.
By the way, I'm going to say something real quick. I'm
Yeah,
confusing West Aliquippa with Logtown. Logtown is actually
is it Ambridge?
across the river. It's closer to Baden, which
Oh, okay, it's over there.
it's
Okay, yeah,
called
yeah,
Baden here, but I mean,
yeah.
if you want to get all technical, it should be called Baden, but
Baden,
whatever.
yeah,
Whatever.
but not too far. Yeah.
No, not too far. From
I
Kelley
think,
Road, it's about 20 miles.
yeah,
16 miles, 20
yeah,
miles, depending on
uh,
how you go. But
right.
here's what I have to say to that. Okay. Curses, I mean, they're a real thing in the sense that people believe in them and they say them. But this is so localized. Why would like that's silly for
It
you to
really
tell like
is.
here's
Yeah.
the reason this not even the whole road because
Just
as you
this
say it's just the
lower
southern
mile.
part.
Yeah.
You get about a mile, everything changes. Well, and again, it may have been a path back in
Hmm.
the day.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, for sure.
Probably not,
Probably
just
not.
because
Yeah.
most of the major, indigenous trails are
Hmm.
still major thoroughfares now. We
Right.
call them Route 79, Route
Hmm.
8, Route
Venango,
19,
Franklin Road right here. That's part of
Franklin Road, which
Venango Trail. You know,
there you go.
yeah, like,
Exactly. So, man, I'm like, let's just say I'm being evicted from my house.
yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, you know what? I lay a curse upon this land approximately 20 miles to the west and over on the other
Yeah.
side of the river in the direction that I'm heading. And you know what? I gotta let's keep this in check. I'm just how about just like maybe there's maybe a few hundred feet of it.
Yeah.
And
It's just
maybe like 20 feet to the left and right as well. Like we need to set some dimensions to
some
this.
serious
Let's not
bout.
get
Yeah.
too crazy here.
Yeah.
That's
It
where
just,
I'm
yeah.
at.
Yeah. It just doesn't, like, none of that even comes close to
Not like
passing
a
the eye
curse,
test.
we know like you can curse a person
Right.
or a family. Now I
Hmm.
don't believe like I it's like I said, I believe people believe this.
Hmm. No, people definitely believe that. Yeah.
I don't.
So, yeah.
But
But,
I do believe that if I wanted to be really effective with it,
hmm.
whether I believed it or not, I was just really upset about a thing.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be like, you know what? I'm drawing a chalk line around this little area of grass right here, and if you step
Yeah.
inside, I can't be held accountable for what happens to you.
Yeah.
No, I curse you. I curse you, I curse your family.
No.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
getting on. So I don't buy any of that for a
Hmm.
moment because again, it's just not reasonable to
It's
me.
not, it's not reasonable. Now, along the same lines, just as just just as crazy, but in a different way, is you can probably guess who else might be supposedly cursing land is satanic cults in the 1980s. Um,
Well, yeah.
who, yeah, why, who,
Why not?
it was in vogue.
Well, and
Um,
it probably here's the thing. They probably didn't even mean to. They probably meant to curse
right.
something else, but they probably spilled it on the way all over the road.
They were trying to get down to Beaver, and yeah, it
Listen,
just,
you ever sit in
um,
the back of a Trans Am? Like,
holding a chalice of,
yeah, it's just, your
yeah.
leg goes to sleep, you step out. One, it's awkward because you got to like climb over that goofy seat. And like,
Hmm.
let that back
Right.
seat's only there for insurance purposes.
Hmm.
And
So, yeah, I mean, there's a whole satanic thing. Is it possible there was an active satanic cult in that area of Beaver in the 80s? Absolutely. There might still be today. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily, even if that is the case, they're out there cursing portions of a road. Because again, for what end? Some people online have answered that question, saying that the reason that that portion of the road is cursed is because they were trying to summon a demon out there and failed. But still, enough bad stuff came through that explains the weird fog, the animals being upset, cars not working right, like all of those kind of things are like, oh, that's because of a failed summoning ritual.
that's not really that far off from what I said,
Right,
was it?
exactly right. Exactly. Now, here's the thing that again, I don't know enough about
No,
the
and
satanic stuff to,
listen, you can't be held accountable for who likes you, who
right.
follows you. But
Yeah,
if I were the Prince of Darkness, I'd be embarrassed.
I'd be embarrassed about that.
I
Yeah,
would
no
think
one
he could
wants a
afford some
failed.
more.
Yeah.
No, no
But
one wants
now,
incompetent followers.
so this one of the things that I need to bring up, and I would say this is apocryphal because it sounds so, it's like too funny to be true, but like we said earlier, this is in Thomas White's book. So I'm taking it as gospel, again, pun intended. What did happen in the 80s is there was a police report filed. There was a specific stone right on the edge of the road that had a satanic Bible on it and some sort of a animal skin on it. And someone saw this and was like, well, there's a satanic cult doing rituals out here on the side of the road. And so Beaver County police did investigate. And what they found was a Bible and a leather jacket. There was a gentleman who lives right near there who had walked out there to sit and, read and went home and just forgot it there. And someone else stumbled upon it and took it for a satanic Bible and an animal skin, not just this poor dude's
I
jacket and
mean,
his
in
actual
fairness, it
Bible.
is an animal skin,
It
but
is an animal skin, they're not wrong. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, but
Well,
but
and real quick, a satanic Bible is just the Bible.
well, that's what well it was reported as a satanic Bible, but
So
I'm
the
not sure.
satanic Bible is just the Bible.
I don't know if the person didn't look close enough,
They
you know.
thought the satanic
Yeah,
part was like in real tiny
yeah,
print
yeah. I mean,
above.
according to this, the guy was just a regular. I don't know if it was a King James or NIV or whatever, but it was just a Bible. The guy was just out there reading it, just doing his thing, not hurting anybody.
No.
Certainly, he
Talk about
certainly
jumping to conclusions. Like that is the
right.
exact opposite,
Yeah, like
I
yeah,
thought.
yeah, exactly. Like that dude's out there just doing his thing, trying to enjoy the
If
day.
what if he had been reading like the Grapes of Wrath?
That would have been yeah, that
Somebody
would
been
be
like, this
timely.
is the satanic Grapes of
This
Wrath.
must the satanic grapes of wrath, or what if
This
for
is silly.
what if it was Peanuts, just like a Peanuts collection, like this is the satanic Charlie Brown.
That's right.
But
I mean, I say that there is no other sort of Charlie Brown, frankly.
yeah,
But look how he's desecrated the image of the Christmas tree, for
right,
example.
right.
I give you my case.
Clearly, no, yeah. But so as far as some of the other things that maybe the sources here, these ones again uh aren't a whole lot more satisfying. One that I thought was, I know you're gonna get a chuckle out of because it's not a great excuse, is the nuclear power plant being close by, both the shipping port one that closed down and what is now the Beaver Valley
Yeah,
power plant.
very familiar. Played quite a few shows in a
Mm-hmm.
hotel immediately across from it.
Right.
Kind of a
Yeah,
weird place to be doing that.
it is.
The tables were bolted. I swear to God, in this hotel, the tables were bolted into a concrete floor. The chairs were not.
Oh, that's just
Never
practical.
had any problem there, but we
But
did take the very first time we played there, we did take note of that.
yeah. And but so the idea of like a power plant, like I know there are folks out there who say the power plants can be conduits for paranormal activity, especially with UFOs. Obviously, Point Pleasant with Mothman, Chernobyl and Fukushima with Mothman. Like I get that that is part of like our cultural zeitgeist for paranormal stuff. Like that being said, that makes just as much sense as the Native American curse 20 miles away.
Agreed.
It's just like,
You
why
know what?
would, yeah,
Listen,
it's such a
Brendan,
bad excuse.
listen, there's
It's
a
such a,
lot of unforeseen byproducts of some heavy industries. I don't even want to
for
tell
sure.
you,
Yeah.
I don't even want to tell you about like the goings on in the dairy industry. Like, there's so much byproduct and they
Oh,
don't know how to move it just yet. And I'm
don't get me
talking
started on
ectoplasm.
nitrates. Yeah. Well, the next, yeah, the ectoplasm. There you
Yeah,
go.
you don't know how much ectoplasm is produced
By one
by
cow.
the by one cow. Right. And these aren't even satanic
The
cows.
cows,
These are
right?
just
Yeah.
run-of-the-mill
You'd assume
bovine
you'd
breeds.
assume the output of a satanic cow would be
Right.
significantly higher, but
Right.
I don't have the data. I don't have the data on that in front of me to
That's
say for sure.
okay. I don't think
But
we need to
yeah, but
take
so
that any
any
deeper than it
further,
has been.
yeah, no, but like the power plant stuff, people reference and everything. Again, not a great reason for me because there's a lot of roads and a lot of other things like you mentioned. Now, you did mention earlier the graveyard. people do talk about that at the end of the road there is a small graveyard.
Ah,
Maybe that is the source of maybe these kids, or something. But again, like there's no like other than this one poor girl, there doesn't seem to be any confirmed like tragic deaths, kind of thing. So
right.
that kind of I think falls into the normal like just like graveyard lore, like, oh, there's a boneyard over there, so this
And
area must be haunted.
here's
You
another
know,
thing to consider. The graveyard is at the
it
northernmost
is the
end of
opposite
it.
end. Yeah. From
This is
where the
all squirrely. Listen, I understand like you're
yeah.
trying to find like
Hmm.
a navel for
That's
this, but
that's what it seems like in a lot of cases. And then like we have probably the least satisfying, which is just that there happens to be a portal in that area that is some sort of a nexus for paranormal activity. Now, I think that there are places that are very, very weird. Maybe entertain that a little bit more. I have just ordered a book on ley lines that I'm looking forward on reading for this for this show. So there is something to just certain areas being weird, but it seems like outside of these supposed phenomena that are very common, other not common, but certainly appear other places, there doesn't seem to be anything uniquely spooky about this actual area. The road,
right.
like you said, this could be any back road in most places. Doesn't seem particularly strange. So
Yeah, I'm going with that. And the fact that it is less than 2 miles long means that even if it is very strange, it's, fairly safe road. Just, speed
yeah,
a little bit and you just got to make it about halfway
right.
and you're done.
You're done.
No
You're good to
problem.
go.
It's not like Franklin Road,
Right. Which is
which is windy. You can't really
unfortunately
go
way
too
worse.
fast, pretty long. And
Mm-hmm.
worse because you've witnessed tragedies in that
Mm-hmm.
immediate area.
Yep. Yep.
I know of plenty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
knock on wood.
granted, this is the next county over, but I
Mm-hmm.
did try to do some digging. I'm not seeing very much
Yeah.
on this place.
Right. And so now, because yeah, a lot of what you find when you look is just variations of kind of what we already talked about. Now, one thing I did want to call out because I was pleasantly surprised while doing my research. First, I was pleasantly surprised seeing Thomas White, as always. Um,
Yeah, he
but I
gets
came,
around, that
he
guy.
does, he sure does. God bless him. So, but I did find an article, and as you guys can imagine out there, we run across a lot of articles about haunted places written for normal, mundane publications.
Slow news week.
Yeah, here's a ghost story.
Right.
Um,
It's fun. I
yeah,
enjoy it.
right. And I'm usually here for those.
Right. Gets me to
Now,
buy the paper.
usually when I find these articles, I'm like, ugh, this is going to be just such a dumb, like fluff piece kind of thing. So I want to specifically call out, like this article is certainly not perfect, but there is this Beaver Times article this is from 2013, so it's a while ago, written by a lady named Lisa Miko. This is one of the best like local ghost hunting story articles that I've probably ever read. Not because it is like, Pulitzer Prize winning journalism, but
Hey,
because
don't deny her that
right. No,
yet.
that's true. Yeah, maybe she has one or she might have one already. I don't know. But it's not because it's the craziest thing in the world, writing wise, but it approaches both the story and the ghost hunters that she rides along with in a very neutral tone. She's not making fun of them. She's not making fun of the witnesses. She's not making fun of the stories. Um, it's actually a very even-handed article, which I frankly just don't see very often. So I want to give both her and the Beaver County Times some serious credit. That's pretty cool. That being said, in this article, they follow a group of ghost hunters that does an investigation on this road and everything. And a lot of it is the stuff you would, kind of anticipate, given what we talked about the activity being. Some of the things that I thought were pretty cool with this, though, is there's a few little like bits of like I think nuggets of truth in this. where like I don't understand, like I don't know if this was supposed to be a bit of a piece on like a cultural piece or not, but I just thought it was interesting. So there's a few things. One is these paranormal investigators mentioned in this article that whenever they're investigating, they carry a paintball gun with them for protection because they very plainly say, if we're going to have a problem, it will likely be with a real person.
This is true.
It is.
I
Yep.
think you'd be better carrying mace
Right. Absolutely.
because
Um,
let me tell you, a paintball gun, it sucks. You will
yeah.
get
I
welts.
used to
You will get
play. Yeah.
stung. You
Yep.
did. You did.
Yep.
You will get
Yep.
bruised. But if I'm really
Hmm.
angry at you,
You can get
that's
through
not
it.
going to
It's not
stop
going to
me.
stop you. Yeah.
No, I'm going to
Um,
shield my eyeballs.
yeah.
But a bear mace,
Right. Dude,
game over.
yeah, it's not a good time.
Although a warning
Um,
to people, like if you're gonna mace somebody, you're supposed to like spray a cloud and walk backwards, but you are gonna get some of that too. Just brace thyself.
right. Well, speaking of thyself. So one of the things that this ghost hunter says whenever they're like getting ready and everything, they're meeting with the reporter as they're talking, he pulls out a religious pamphlet titled Death that was given to him just moments before, and said, "Yeah, we get a lot of these."
I
He
do
got
too.
he
That's one of
got
those chick pamphlets, isn't it?
Yeah, he
I think
says
I have that
he
one.
he got up while walking through the parking lot of McDonald's in Baden, where his team was planning to meet up for the evening. And he says, "I'm not really into religion, but I try and be respectful when people do this." And I'm like, you know what? This guy's pretty even. I can respect that. Um,
Sure.
so
Yeah, I don't like how for those of you not aware, those chick pamphlets, you know
mhm.
where I see the most is
Where's
in
that?
public restrooms.
Oh, like on top of urinals? Yeah, I
Yeah.
see him there. Yeah.
Well, if your recruitment strategy is urinals, that's
Right.
not a great starting place. Like I don't want to be saved. I don't
Hmm.
that's not where I go for truth. It's the
Right.
urinal.
The urinal. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm digressing too much, too frequently.
No, it's all good. So in the ghost hunter in this story talks about hearing the story that got them to come out for it because they're based over, or at least they were based over in the East Hills of Pittsburgh. And he talks about the boy and the ghost boy and his dog that appears on the road. Because he said he actually found a story of a girl that kept seeing this boy out of her window when they lived on the road. Said it kept glaring at her and scared her so bad. Apparently, they both kept coming closer and closer to the house. And the kid kept complaining to the mom and the dad about the ghost boy and his dog. And one night they went into the room and the parents apparently saw it as well. So
Okay.
that's kind of a fun little example of like thinking the kids, just having imagination and you see that. And the parents confirmed that they ended up moving out of the house shortly afterwards because they were just like kind of noped out. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah.
And now this hunter interviewed these people?
That's what the gentleman says here,
Okay.
Broman. And so yeah, so I mean, but overall, it's actually a really good little article, and they don't end up finding much. And they say they are very clear that like, yeah, even if you go somewhere that's really haunted, for one night, you're not necessarily going to find anything. So I thought they were very even-handed in that as well. But yeah, overall, it was just a cool little article. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Because again, I really did appreciate the author's approach to it because it wasn't like LOL, look at these
Right.
idiots.
Right.
Um, so I thought that was cool. So overall, I'd say Kelley Road very well might be haunted. There's no shortage of stories. I feel like if there is a source, it's probably not any of the ones that are listed on here, that we've talked about tonight. It's probably either a mix of those things or something far more complicated that we're not really aware of yet. That tends to be how a lot of these folklore things work, right? Um,
Agreed.
it's if everyone decides it's haunted, then it's haunted. So yeah, that's Kelley Road. If you come across a haunted road or a story or anything like that that you would like to make us aware of or want us to look into, you can always reach out to us. You can find us at the Ghost Furnace Podcast on either Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. or you can send us an email at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com.